Looking at the French order of battle, we see that the corps has 3 foot artillery batteries, and that we have 3 light cavalry regiments. Looking at the various divisions, we see that in the Auerstaedt game, each division appears to have attached horse and foot batteries, and in addition to the battalions, they also have some light infantry companies that are part of the regiment. Pretty much the same for both. Looking at the order of battle for the French at Hossenhausen, we see that they have the 3 light cavalry regiments as before, and they have the artillery for the entire corps is now only 5 batteries. In the Auerstaedt game, there were 9, so there's 4 fewer batteries in this particular version. If we begin to look at the various divisions, we see that the regiments are of similar size, 20 increments. The 1st and 2nd battalions are 1 increment shorter, and that's then allowing for this special grenadier or elite battalion for those, instead of the smaller companies. And so that's pretty much the case all the way down the line for the entire division. Here we're looking at the Prussian order of battle for Auerstaedt. We've got the king and the queen and the duke and various leaders. Blücher with his cavalry and the various Prussian divisions with the associated cavalry and horse artillery. We see that most of the Prussian regiments have got 16 increments, and that there are a number of grenadier battalions that have about 6 increments. The Prussians then have attached some horse artillery and a certain amount of foot artillery. Now we're looking at the order of battle for the Hossenhausen game. We have Brunswick and Kalkruth, their units. As we see with most of the Prussian regiments, they're 14 increments instead of 16. And we see that the grenadier battalions are 7 increments instead of 6 increments in the Auerstaedt game. We see that there is a couple of different types of artillery. There is the line artillery, there is the foot artillery, and then in some cases there is the heavy artillery that has the movement of 4. There's also a considerable amount of cavalry, and it is a much larger body of cavalry than was represented in the Auerstaedt game. Now let's take a look at the units and see how they compare. Marshal Davout's ratings are pretty similar. The difference is that in the Hassenhausen game, his cavalry rating is 2 less, and his artillery rating is also 2 less than what it was in the Auerstaedt game. Looking at the 25th Line Regiment Battalion, we see that their ratings have diminished somewhat. In the Auerstaedt game, they had a morale of 15 and a fire value of 8. In the Hossenhausen game, they have a fire value of 7 and a morale of 25. Now we're looking at the second chasseurs. We see that in the both games, their morale and their skirmish value is the same. In the Auerstaedt game, though, their melee value was 4 greater. Finally, looking at this foot artillery, we see that the factors are pretty consistent. The difference seems to be just with where the morale rating is a 12 in the Auerstaedt game and a 16 in the Hossenhausen game. The fire value and the melee value are somewhat less in the Hossenhausen version of the game. And now let's do a comparison of the Prussian units. We'll take a familiar person, Marshal Blücher, although he's not a marshal at this stage, I believe. And you see that in the Auerstaedt game, 3 for infantry, 6 for cavalry, and 6 for melee. In the Hassenhausen game, it's a -2 for infantry, and the same for cavalry and morale as in the Looking at this Hussar unit, you can see that the morale is better, and the skirmishing ability is a little bit less. However, the melee to increments is about the same between the two games. So not much difference here. Looking at the cuirassier unit, we see that it is much larger in the Hossenhausen game than it was represented in the Auerstaedt game. The value, as far as melee to increments, is similar. The big difference also is that the morale value is much better in the Hossenhausen game than it was in the Auerstaedt game. Now, comparing a typical line infantry, we see that in the Hassenhausen game, their column or printed value for firing is about half of what it is in the Auerstaedt game. The melee value is very similar, and we see that the base morale value is higher, 32 in the Hossenhausen game versus 22 in the Auerstaedt game. Looking at the 24th Foot Battery, we see that the values are fairly similar. There's a little bit better value for the short range fire in the Hassenhausen game compared to the Auerstaedt game. We also see that the morale level is better in the Hassenhausen game, 21 versus 33 in the Auerstaedt game. The range is a little shorter in the Hassenhausen versus the Auerstaedt. Finally, we compare a grenadier battalion, as we see its printed fire value in the Hassenhausen game is less than it was in the Auerstaedt game. Its melee value is much stronger, though, and its morale level is higher than it was in the Auerstaedt game.